Видите, вот мы в этом как раз совершенно безграмотные
we are all
люди.
ignorant in this matter. We have been told many times about Curie, Röntgen, Röntgen, REM, whatever other units, but we don't know anything.
Мы ничего не знаем.
Well, I know that radiation is bad for health. Even low doses affect health. I read about it in the local paper.
I'm not afraid either of radiation or anything else in the world. What can I know about it when science knows too little about it?
Panic was tremendous because of radiation. No one could judge what harm it can do and what happens afterwards. People just abandon their houses and go away. I plan to leave if I have a chance, find a better job.
These people live in cities, towns, and villages in what became known as areas affected by the Chernobyl accident. These affected areas stretch over parts of territories of the Ukraine, Belarus, and the Russian Federation. All in all, there are some 2,700 settlements with a combined population of about 1 million people. The ill-fated fourth unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant has been sealed by a sarcophagus. But nonetheless, many concerns and fears exist about immediate and long-term effects of Chernobyl fallout.
In October 1989, the Soviet government asked the International Atomic Energy Agency to carry out an assessment of the radiological consequences in the Soviet Union of the Chernobyl accident, as well as an assessment of the protective measures they had taken to protect the population. The response was an international effort carried out by almost 200 scientists from 24 countries.
The geography of the project covered affected areas in the 3 Soviet republics. In the years since the accident, a considerable amount of data on environmental contamination had been collected, and this data served to determine exact locations for the fieldwork. The job of the experts here, as in many other locations, was to measure air and soil contamination.
0,85, mit Victoren 0,9, mit MAB 0,8.
The necessary instrumentation was brought along. Delicate instruments did most of the job and did it well. But there was some muscle work, too. In order to form a representative picture of overall contamination, the number of soil and grass samples ran into hundreds. The grass, sealed in plastic bags together with other samples, traveled to laboratories in various countries for scrupulous analysis. The experts went to selected locations, but they were not restricted in their movement or work. They carried on their activities as required by the project and were willingly admitted into public places and individual homes. Moreover, as in this kindergarten, they were specifically asked to take measurements. Savici, some 40 kilometers from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Quite high contamination levels were expected in this village, but a visitor to Savici is surprised to see that in spite of radiation, life still goes on here. The villagers showed keen interest in the field work done by the experts. The local people had been relocated soon after the accident, but the majority had come back, disregarding the official ban. It seems that nothing could waver the determination of these people to stick to their traditional way of life and their homes. As for the project, one of the main tasks was to determine safe living conditions.
This is a so-called APERM type of radiation measurement, which should stay in this house for 1 month or 2 months to be picked up again, and from the different radiation which has been measured by this dosimeter, which is exactly the same, but packed in a plastic and sealed up here to be proof against the radon which comes from the ground. And this will measure all the radiation which is here in this room.
The stops at villages designated for the survey lasted longer than strictly required for the measurements. The human dimension was always in evidence. Time for a quick Polaroid photo before the group takes its leave and moves on to another location. Facts do not always lie on the surface. Sediment samples from a lake close to the evacuation zone provide valuable material for analysis. Water flows, time passes, and things change. But this brown slice of sediment from the bottom of the lake possesses a memory that can be probed. In the late stages of the project, radiation meters were collected from locations where they were deposited by previous teams. Some 2,000 measurements of external gamma dose rates at outdoor and indoor locations were taken. This particular task has been carried out to meet one of the goals of the project, to verify the available data on environmental contamination. The locations were private homes, schools, and kindergartens. Since the project did not undertake to duplicate all of the efforts of the Soviet authorities, the measurements taken have served as key input parameters to corroborate methodology used in the Soviet analysis.
Чистый.
Да. Yes, it's
Это
clean.
правда?
Да, it's true. It's true. Это правда. Your house is clean. Ваш дом чистый.
Not all of the houses in the affected areas are that safe. The evacuation zone has villages and settlements abandoned immediately after the accident because of high radiation levels. The deserted houses are slowly decaying, and there's little chance that people would ever come back to these settlements. One way to quantify the radiological situation in the affected areas is by contamination maps. This one shows contamination in cesium-137. The area is extremely large, stretching from the north of Kiev, running through southern and eastern provinces of Byelorussia, and then going into the south of the Russian Federation. Shortly after the accident, the highest environmental contamination was in the 30-kilometer zone shown as a circle on the map. Few accessible roads coming close to the 30-kilometer zone are left. This is the prohibited zone. Since the accident, this is as far as you can go. Fenced off by barbed wire, this zone immediately around Chernobyl will remain closed for human habitation for many years to come. Within a stone's throw from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant lies the town of Pripyat. It's a ghost town now, abandoned by its 45,000 inhabitants. Pripyat is designed to stand out in solitude until it falls down under its own weight. Relocation of people from these areas was mandated by the authorities. But rehousing population from places with lower levels of radiation remains a controversial issue.
We all have the same plans, immediate relocation. There is a plan for relocation, but the whole point is where? There is no housing, no place to move in.
The psychological pressure put on the population with the help of the press by means of incompetent, unprofessional judgments is being felt more strongly now, and probably after the accident itself. The biggest misfortune is when people can't grasp the situation, when they can't correctly estimate the risk factor.
At the time of the Chernobyl accident, the prevailing winds blew to the north and west. Because of the wind factor and sporadic rainfall, the heaviest radiation effects were felt across an area between the eastern provinces of Byelorussia and the south of the Russian Federation. That is why teams of experts have also explored the southern parts of the Russian Federation. Here in Novye Bobovichi, water samples were taken from one of the many public water wells closed down for fear of contamination. One of the goals of the project was to verify the Soviet methodology. In implementing this task, international experts had understanding and assistance from their Soviet counterparts. An Austrian expert and a local Soviet radiation officer probed the same soil, but with different tools. Teams of international experts were also able to examine work done and data accumulated by research institutions in the affected areas. For example, a visit to the Institute of Agricultural Radiology in Gomel provided a lot of evidence.
I was very impressed because they collected a tremendous amount of data. They are well stored there. They are used for tables, for graphs, for maps. And above all, I was deeply impressed because they did not just only collect data, they gave also advice to the people to improve the situation. And I was deeply impressed by that improvement. If you just compare the contamination level, for instance, of pasture land, or what is even more important, of milk in the years 1986, 87, 89, and now, you see a really great improvement, which now, in most of the areas, came down to background level.
One of the major features of the contamination pattern. It is very uneven, with wide variations in intensity.
However, the numbers in this map should be taken with caution. The external limit of this area represents the contamination level that has been found in many West European cities. Therefore, it can give you a wrong picture if you look in the full contamination map. The real problem is not the contamination. The problem is the doses that people receive, the radiation dose that people receive, and the health effects on these people.
To calculate doses properly, information was needed on internal body contaminants. Novozybkov in the Russian Federation was one of the locations